but it also had the way of basically, okay, oh, sorry, let me just do this. They also had a way of assessing which patients would be candidates for that particular therapeutic, right? So they have these two called companion diagnostics, and you also have the molecule that will provide some treatment. So they were pretty good at that, and they were acquired by Lilly in 2019. And then starting, Loxo started being more on the kind of discovery side, doing the science they were doing, the good science they were doing. And you can see here that there are three main points of information with Loxo. You have identifying the right targets, right? Working together with different sort of, scientific advisors, clinicians, patients, academic researchers, and then ones that basically like perform finding, basically performing this rational design of different sort of compounds to target those specific, uh, uh, diseases. And then moving that to specific studies, you kind of like already have a narrowed down population where you can run these tests and assess if they could be candidates for clinical trials, and then pursuing, once those drugs are approved and they get launched, you kind of already know where these are going rather than just kind of like sending a bullet to everything, right? So I think that's the approach that Loxo has. And back last year, what happened is that it was a discovery side and then the development side, and then Loxo became the whole pipeline. So now we are part also on that development side that's moving to the oncology business unit, and now we're Loxo at Lilly. So I think this is very interesting to see, because as a company, when you're at school, they tell you about these pharmaceutical companies, and then you're thinking, what happens in the machine? What happens internally to come to these decisions? And I think that there are three main components that happen when you're going into this, kind of career path. One is like you really need to understand the science, to understand what you're trying to do. So I think that having a background in science is really always super helpful, because that connects the dots with the business teams. On the business side, it's also very important to know where you're stepping in and also what are best practices to make sure that you have certain processes in place that you can implement and for people to kind of rely on them. And when I say processes and I say business, I'm talking from the business operation perspective. So based on what I do, what my goal like here at the Loxo is to work with the scientists, different project managers, legal, finance, and I'm the connector. And what I do is I negotiate the contracts, basically the legal, like the documents, right, with the external parties to make those external relationships happen. At one point, I was managing more on the discovery side, working with the biology, chemistry, biologics, different groups. And then I started expanding more, now working more with the biomarkers team, So it's always this wide range of technologies and projects and, different sort of relationships that happen with external parties, and you have to be up to speed. And then now that I gave you this kind of like quick snapshot, I'm just going to move now into what I learned at KGI, which I think what it's more relevant to this speaker series, right? So I was actually part of a cohort of the 2010-2012 Master in Business, and in that time it was called a Master in Business of Bioscience. Now it has been changed to Master of Business and Science, and my focus was discovery and development, and also business. So you can see here, that's the old template of what we used to have for the TPM, or our TMP, Team Masters project, right? Where we will like put together a group of people, and then we will be working with different sponsors. So in that time, believe it or not, I was very much into biofuels. That was the field that I was very interested in. And there happened to be a project with Clear Springs at that time that actually worked on understanding basically an economic analysis of the byproducts from, having biofuels in place. And I remember this was actually like what our faculty advisor was Joe West, who he's still at KGI, and he is working with a lot of students. He's the head of the MBS program. And as you can see here, we're working with Joe, and we're like talking and discussing, and we had tons of ideas on our boards. We really learned how to collaborate and work in a team, and also listen to what the business needs were, so we can start translating those into, questions that could be answered by performing some additional primary and secondary research. So I think that this experience really helped me in honing those skill sets of working together with different mindsets. Also learning how to prioritize work, because I think that one of the main issues that happen everywhere you go is what needs to get done first, right? And I think that only happens when you have some hands-on experience on, pinpointing things that will be most important to have, in place first. And this is something that we also learn through the TMP process and also through the classes at KGI. And I can say that that also like helped me to also create other types of relationships, because again, talking about transactions and life sciences, I think it's also about building those trust, building that trust and that relationships with the different parties. So in my next slide, I'm going to show you some screenshots of what the materials that already are in the KGI website. So when I was in my master's, I also decided to start working with more and more creating awareness of these different career paths and opportunities with students in Latin America. I'm originally from Mexico City, so I understood the need of really, really creating, bridges between, what opportunities there are in the career path, but also which tools do you need, and at this point, like what even KGI could offer, because I think that even now something very unique is that you can go through the regular MBA path, regular business school path, but you will learn a lot of different tools, but not necessarily that applicable to the biotech and pharmaceutical industry, which is something that here at KGI we really had. And then at the other end was also making sure that the science was not lost, because that's one of the main things that we see, right? If you don't understand the science, I think it's going to be very difficult to go into this industry. So when I was in my MBS program, I started joining some organizations externally. And then when I graduated from the MBS program, I actually decided to stay in KGI for a PhD. And the reason was that I wanted to actually have my own company. And at that time, it was mostly focusing on biofuels. So again, derived from my TMP experience and my work and the opportunities, and we needed to perform some technological validation. So I actually talked to different people in KGI, some advisors, and I ended up going into that path. As you can see, projects sometimes don't go the way that you want. So at the end of the day, I had to change my project for my PhD, and I ended up focusing on analyzing genomic variants in different types of cancers, particularly prostate cancer. And it was a shift, right? But at that time, I kept involved in these organizations, and I kept going back to different countries, including Mexico, Colombia, Bolivia, creating more awareness of what could happen. And I can tell you that by doing this, more students joined KGI. I think that you can see, maybe you don't recognize these faces, but maybe Shelby can see that there's some people that recently graduated from the KGI program too, like on the right-hand side. Now you will see that there's Elsie Rivero, and there was also another guy, Alfonso Canto, that enrolled. And right now they're actually working, in different companies in the US. So I think that these also happen to be because they trust, that what I was learning was something that was valuable, that they could see that there was an output of having, to put myself into that investment, of taking the opportunity to continue pursuing my studies, and also at the same time creating relationships. And that kind of like trickles down into the path of what others could also see them doing in this space, right? So I think that was really, really important and really interesting. And I just wanted to show you that at KGI, I think that beyond just going and enrolling in your classes, you have that other area, right, that you can navigate and experience and look for opportunities to keep connecting with your community, but also keep creating relationships that will enable and allow you to keep growing your career path. So I think that's something that happens in KGI when people are always willing to learn and collaborate, all the time. And then I have like just a thank you, these very simple slides, because to be all very, very honest with you, I want this to be more like a kind of like question and answer type of situation. For those folks that join a little bit later, I just explain a little bit about what I do currently in my role, what type of education I pursued in KGI, and depending on how many people, I wanted to open more like a form of questions and answers based on what I just shared with you on this few topics. So I'm going to open the forum, and I think you can also open your microphones in case you have any other questions. If you want to have like, more like a chit chat, let me know how you feel and how we can have this conversation going.
Susanna, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to know what are the positions more demanded in the industry? So yeah, maybe you can help me to know these type of positions.
Yeah, thank you, Susanna. So as I said, I worked before I joined Loxo and the business operations position. I was at the Regeneron Genetics Center in the strategic partnerships and business operations team. I think from my end, again, going back into what I do, which is negotiating contracts with external parties for engagement. One of the things that I always see is like someone that could understand the risks associated with doing certain type of work. I'm going to be very like, what does that even mean, right? Like someone, again, going back into someone that understands science. I'm going to show you something just quickly, because I know that we have this presentation, but I want to show you something beyond this. Let me finish this. Actually, I'm hiring, and I was actually hiring last month. I started hiring for my team, and I can show you that one of the key points that I had for my group, because I'm going to start building that. I'm going to show it to you. So you have this, and then you have careers. This is a Loxo website, right? And then here in careers, as I showed you that, you're going to see that same thing. And then here, careers. I was actually hiring for an associate manager and specialist in business operations. And here you will see that some of the most important traits that I was looking for, and I'm saying I was looking for because the human resources team at Loxo extended an offer to a former KGI student that just graduated this year. So I'm hoping that KGI student that is not a student anymore, is now an alumni, accepts the offer from our end to join the team by the end of this week. But I can tell you that I'm hiring and I'm getting someone from KGI. That's as simple as that, right? And why? Because that person I already know based on the assessment we performed, which was not only a simple interview, there was a written assessment. We literally sent a document to this person for review and redline and provide input on risk areas, basically pinpointing, as I'm saying, the most important things for me are risks. Someone that can pinpoint things and risks for the work that we need to get done, and also was able to make the calls on the business side, right? I understand that it's important to have intellectual property, right? That ties back to the classes that I took with, for instance, with Joel West, right? Or with other teachers on the business side of KGI. Intellectual property is always that something they bring to the note, to your book, or you're like talking about it, but in reality, this is something that all pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies need, right? So someone that can translate that to the real world, it's so important. So going back into your question, these are the traits that I'm looking for. Someone that understands, has a good understanding on biotechnology and the pharmaceutical industry. Someone that understands science, that can have a conversation with me on the scientific side. If I start talking about next generation sequencing, that you can go back and forth with me on that, if that's your field, right? Someone that has the ability to communicate efficiently and effectively. What does that mean? If I'm talking to you, I want to be succinct because I only have 30 minutes for a call, and I want to make sure that we hit every single point for decision making, rather than having to create a bunch of scenarios and just go around, how do you say this? Like that you're beating the bush, or like, kind of like trying to find, just succinct to the point, what needs to get done, and then action items, right? Who needs to get something done, and who needs to be accountable for that. So that's something very important. Another thing that we need is someone that can multitask. It's not always that you have one project and that project is moving at the pace that you need. Sometimes we have multiple projects, on the horizontal side, multiple projects, but also each project has its own complexities. So you're able to manage this level of, information, go to the point when having discussions for escalation, and understand science and understand business, and you can put it down to action. those are the most important things that I need, at least from what I've seen on the roles that I've been performing so far. Yeah.
Thank you, Paola.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Hi, when you graduated, did you also have the required internship? And if so, how did you, I guess, like navigate that landscape?
Yeah. So actually, when I was in the master's, we had to take the internship between the first and the second year. So I actually interned at Life Technologies and that time, which is now Thermo Fisher Scientific, right? And on that time, it was very interesting because you have to start applying early in the stage of like, I think as soon as you start joining KGI, you start to like start talking to your professors, or like people that are already like trying to find positions. Because for instance, I know that the first group of people that are out for interviews are the ones who are interested in consulting, right? Those are the first batch that go into that space. So I think it's very stressful for people that have not been exposed to that arena, because it's like they see others moving and they're always like, oh, I have to move too. And it's like, why do you need to move? Do you really want to do this? It's always that anxiety, right? There's a second batch of basically companies knowing that they're going to have the resources to sponsor interns. So I think that when you have a chance to connect with former KGI alumni, they already went through that, and they're in companies that might open up those internship positions, if you can get those on your radar right away and start talking to them, that's also very valuable. Another way to navigate that is like I could tell you that my offer for that time came kind of like late in the timeline. So I think that I got my offer in April, and then we're going on a summer break in May, and then internship started in June. I think something crazy like that, right? So I think that if a company really wants to work with you, you can always be like very transparent about where you are and what other documentation you need, especially for international students, because you need to have other aspects covered, such as the CPT and making sure that you have all that documentation ready, your social security number. And I think that if you're able to articulate that, but also make sure that they see the value of waiting maybe for a couple of more weeks for you, I think you're going to be very successful in landing, a good internship, and also a good company that understands where you are in that process, right? So I think that that's also something that I had to navigate, and the manager that I had at that time was very understanding. But again, it was more about conversations and making sure that they see your value. I think that was key. And then when I graduated, because I stayed for my PhD, I really didn't have to do any other sort of internship for curricular value. But before I enter into the PhD program, one of the former PPM students, I think the PPM program is no longer at KGI, but at that time he was already working and doing some consulting, and he was becoming a good, stakeholder within that boutique firm in Los Angeles. And he knew that I was fluent in more than one language because I also speak Spanish, and he needed to do some market research in a different setting, and he was not able to get a response from them because he couldn't speak Spanish. So he brought me in and he said, hey, you speak like basically Spanish, but also you speak technical Spanish, right? So do you know these people? And I was like, yeah, from my previous life and my previous job, which I was like tech transfer before I joined like KGI, I kind of know these people. So he's like, okay, I need to set this up. I need to have these interviews. Can you help me out? And I was like, yeah. So we talk about kind of a project-based contract where I was there for 2 months, helping him out in performing that research, a market research, right? And having some interviews so he can collect the information he needed for his main client. So I think that how I navigated that was more about, again, building relationships, communicating clearly what your needs are, and then what other things you need to take care of while you're basically saying yes to any proposal. And again, I think that that was like 2 of the most important things that I need to cover, when I was navigating that particular landscape for the internship setting. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was wondering, what's some advice that you can give on networking starting out at KGI that you wish you'd received when you first started out?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because, I remember it was always so awkward. I'm an extrovert person, so I can see myself going out and talking, but I can see that also I have an introvert side, and I didn't feel comfortable just cold, kind of like breaking into a group and listening. I think that it was more about kind of observing others how they behave and having some mocking sessions. Literally, like I think that you can do the role playing of like, okay, this is the setting, let's see how you can start a conversation, things that I would know before approaching someone. You don't need to know everything, right, about everyone that is going to be in attendance to that meeting, but if you can do some research about, who's going to be in that particular group, if you can read a little bit about their companies, what they're doing, pay attention to if they're having some sort of presentations, perhaps pay attention to that. If you don't have really questions, approach them in a way that you're curious about what they do. If they're just like, you do recognize someone in those group settings, so you really want to talk to them, kind of like clear your mind, take a deep breath, and then really think through about what you want to ask that can trigger that conversation, right? I think that's also very important, being mindful about that. Other things that I would have known, dress code, sometimes you would see people that will come with like a wrinkled shirt or like dirty shoes, like try to avoid that, be ready, be professional, be presentable, because the way that they perceive you, it's going to be the first impression that's going to be always in their head. So if you can just be ready to approach them in a professional way, be presentable, and then at some point even ask the question, hey, if there's an opportunity for me to reach out to you via email, that would be better rather than asking for their phone number, or like asking them to send me like, can I connect with you through LinkedIn right away when they don't know you? That's always awkward because you don't know, how they really manage their own networks, right? So I think best approach is to like, hey, would you mind if I send you an email? And then just send a simple email saying, hey, thank you. It was great chatting with you during that day. I learned so much XYZ. I wish I could continue being connected with you. What would be the most appropriate way? And let them tell you, right? Okay, this is my LinkedIn. Here you go. And then you connect with them right away. It's this nuance of conversation that sometimes they don't tell you when you join because it's something that you have not done in the past, right? So I think that's a cadence on that relationship, and it's all about practice. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Make mistakes, right? But learn from them. Yeah, those are the things that I would have loved to know when I reached KTI. Yeah.
To follow up on that, may we please connect with you via LinkedIn?
There you go. Yeah, you can find out. It's like, okay, now that we have this group, yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. You will see that I'm just like very succinct, my name, the department I'm working on at the company. And then when you send also notes on LinkedIn, that's the other thing, remind us where we met, hey, we met on this chat or we talk, because you don't know how many things can come through. I mean, I'm trying to be like very proactive on my social network and just review who comes in and say, hey, hello, kind of stay connected. But if there's I've seen people that when they open their LinkedIn, it's like hundreds of notifications that they have not opened, like, and I don't even know how long, right? So if just one more of them, you might get missed, or it will be awkward and just like decline everything and you're in that pile, right? So if you just send an extra note saying like, hey, we met in this space, thank you, that will help a lot, But yeah, of course, you can do it. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Well, I have another question. So in terms of the education you received in KGI, what do you think was the most valuable thing you learned there? And also, do you think is it more important the experience or I'm not I mean, is it also valuable the experience working like in the industry, or maybe you think it is necessary to like have a broad knowledge first to start working in the industry? I don't know what you think about it.
Yeah, no, thank you for your question, Susanna. I think that tackling the first piece of what you wanted to address, right, which is, okay, let me think about this. So you said, what's most important thing? Have a, experience plus education. And then what was the other one that you mentioned?
Like the most valuable thing you learn in
Yes.
KGI.
From KGI. So I think that I have to tell you, I think the most valuable thing too I found on KGI was first the mix of classes. You have an option to take, in vitro diagnostics. You have an option to take just pure organizational behavior. You have an option to take, I don't know, like molecular basis of diseases, and then you have an option to take, I don't know, corporate finance. And then all of these might seem disconnected. I think that finding that extra, making the time to have that extra step on seeing how the dots connect is always better. So going sometimes for additional, hours that professors open, like, we have a time, I remember it's like the open door policy when they can just go and talk to the professor, talk to, whomever kind of like created some curiosity in you, approaching them on the halls or going to their offices and kind of chat to them. I think that was one of the most valuable, important things to me. I can tell you that at this day, I still have connection with professors at KGI. For example, Dr. Ian Phillips, he's fantastic. I think he retired a few years ago, and we still stay in touch because, he was such a good mentor. He was so good in always kind of like chatting about things. It's a man that has always been very informed of what's happening on the scientific side. So you always have a nice chat with him, and I can tell you that I still connect with him, just see how things are going. I know he published a book recently and I already got it. So I've been telling him I needed to be signed, things like that. I think that that's most important to me. And then with respect to, that's relationships management basically, right? And people, and the most important thing that I learned KJ, how to sustain those connections, and also having the opportunity to go beyond what it was taught in the classroom and ask more questions than those, hours that professors allocated to talk to students. It's only about to go and discuss why you had a mistake on your assignment, right? Or why you got a bad mark in your essay. It's also to chat about other things. So use those times for that too. And then with respects to what's the good balance? Well, I can tell you that to me right now, it's both. Like, I decided to stay in KGI to invest in my education because I knew that a PhD, for sure, I wanted to get more involved in research. I like research, but after being in research, I noticed that I was better being the person liaising on those, with those researchers rather than being the one at the bench. I just realized that, and because I have a passion to be a connector, I'm a connector. I like to connect people, right? So naturally, I was drawn into this other business world. But I can tell you too that I had an opportunity to start my career in business operations and in strategic partnerships because someone believed in me, right? And perhaps on that moment, I didn't have everything that they needed for me to basically say, oh, this is the perfect candidate, like this person has genetics and also has business understanding and has some tech transfer. It was clear that I was still missing some skill set on how to work through contracts, right? Because contracts is not something that they teach you at school. I think contracts is something that they teach to lawyers, right? But how to read a contract, how to write a contract on the side of like business things, that's a different thing. And that's not taught in any school as far as I know, unless you go to law school, right? So I think that somebody saw that I had the transferable skill set, that I had critical thinking skills, and that I was able to be trainable. Like if someone said, okay, Paula, these are XYZ, the most important things. Here is what you need to do. Show me if you can transfer what I just explained you to paper. That component of logic and critical thinking was for them something that they saw something that could be, trainable and could be groomed and could go into a growth path. So having that champion really helped me a lot. So I think that never go into it's going to be sick. There's no perfect formula, right? It's also finding your true passions, showing, what you can do with the information that you have so far. Trust me, nobody knows everything, right? And I think the other point is like, don't be so self-critical because you believe that you want to be like the expert on this field. Nobody's an expert. Trust me. I work with experts and still there's things that they miss, And I can tell you that I've been in this position and sometimes I'm like a whistleblower because I notice other things that even higher ups are doing, right? And I'm just like, whoa. But it's more like, because there needs to have a continuous conversation. Nothing is static. especially in science. There's so many advances. I can tell you, I see so many things that are advancing at a very fast pace. What was new last week, this week has changed, right? So I think that having to keeping yourself, you know, keep reading about what's going on in the landscape. There's tons of websites. You have for example, a website called Stat. Stat tells you everything that's happening in the pharmaceutical, area. Stat is always telling you like this company had this approval, this company had a launch, they pushed them back on this clinical trial, or like, oh my God, this company just merged with this other company, this company has been called in because they're doing XYZ activities that are not okay, and you read what's going on and they give you every day a brief. So you see what's going on. That's competitive intelligence. Then you have, I'm into genetics, right? So I'm like Genome Web. In Genome Web, I see everything too. Who has a new diagnostic thing? Who has now this potential target of interest, right? Who is developing something new with another company in a partnership? So keeping yourself, reading about that, it's also very important to have a conversation and to know where you are. Because I'm telling you, nothing is static. Everything is moving all the time. So if you're curious and you're willing to take that extra additional time to read about that, I think that's gonna get you beyond, it's going to be a point where people can see the difference between you and the others. They're just sitting down and watching TV, and I don't know, that's not bad, but I'm just saying, that's the extra step that other people do.
Thank you, Pat.
On a related note, what does continuing in education look like for you?
Very good. Actually, now I'm getting more into, I know I was telling this the other day to my boss and she flipped, like, I want to go to law school. And she was like, what? She was like, no. And I'm like, okay, So now, of course, she will not say no. But I really think that I would love to get more into, the legal space. That's something that I've always loved. I think when I was even joining my bachelor's in genetics, I was like, I want to do some legal genetic stuff. And then, yeah, that's a really good one. That's the one. And life just slowly started pushing me to start working with these group, right? And everyone, that when they say legal, everyone like shivers, right? It's like, oh my God, legal is here, But there are different types of attorneys. And for instance, I work a ton with IP transactions attorneys. I'm now starting to work with the privacy attorneys. I'm working with, specific attorneys for projects that the company is working on, and they're just responsible for certain programs. I think from the educational point of view, I think I would like to get a certification in privacy, and like, yeah, I think privacy is really, really interesting. And there's this IAPP, and IAPP, you have to take a test. And because, from my personal, like even relationship, I am my partner, my boyfriend, he's German. So I actually like to learn more about GDPR, which is the regulations that happen on the privacy side. And since I work with things now related to the EU, I'm also learning that if I at some point want to move to Germany, I will have to know more about GDPR. So this is another opportunity, right? And it just happened that I started working with this more, and it was because I understood I'm going to just talk about like individual level data, on coming from specific patients of interest coming from the EU. That and these type of things trigger other things like, oh, we're a controller, we're a processor. And then these are things that only happen when you keep getting involved into these organizations. So continuously, I think it will be more like either privacy or IP, because also on the IP side, there's so many things that you can work on. And yeah, right now I'm the one to go through that. When I have to review contracts, I'm the one to be liaising with the IP transactions attorneys, and they're like, good job. And I was like, should I go to law school? Maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
Exciting to say the least. I sent no comment actually in the private chat.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Yes, I'll take a look.
I was gonna ask a question about like sort of what pathway you went in your decision making to figure out what you wanted to do, but it sounds like you're still figuring it out.
Believe it or not, Robert, yes. I think that I can tell you that I've been taking opportunities, Robert, as they come, not because there's no other resource, no, because I like to listen to my intuition. And for instance, when I joined the Regeneron Genetics Center in that position, I got excited because I interviewed with a VP that was working with founder in special populations. And what did he do? he was going to really remote part of the, remote areas in the world to see if he could get some samples from different types of tribes, or groups with different genetic markups, so we can, Regeneron could sequence them, and we could perform collaborations with different researchers around the world, and that's in the public domain. You could look for him. His name is Alan Schulina. And the way that he was so passionate about the work and what I was going to be contributing to his goal really draw me in. And I think that for me, that was like, okay, for me saying yes, going into that company. And then when this other opportunity came up with Loxo, they actually found me, Robert. Like literally, they found me on LinkedIn. And they said, hey, because that's what starts happening. These are headhunters, right? So they reached out to me and they said, hey, we know that you have this background. Would you be available for a quick chat? And it was like an external company. It was not even Loxo itself. So I was like, okay. And they told me, we have this opportunity with a potential client. You will be doing X, Y, and Z. Would you be open to chat? I was like, well, why not, right? And this is like the thing. You can always chat. You don't have to say yes. It's like, okay. And then they explained me a little bit about what their goal was. And then I noticed that, I was hitting a point at the other job where I was not seeing another opportunity for growth. It was more like doing more of the same without having a chance to say, okay, what else is there within the same company? So when this opportunity came up, I was like, okay, let's talk about this. And they basically explained me, went through the interview process. And when they start offering you, you can have this, you can have that. And of course, money is important. They gave me more money. I was like, why not? So I did. And I joined this group. And then I've been in this job for a year and 8 months. And I joined, Robert, as a manager, and I was promoted. I had a double promotion last week. And now I'm associate director. So I had a double promotion from Lilly, which I couldn't believe, but it's because I love what I do. And they gave me more responsibility. Thank you, Amy. Yay! And they gave me a direct report. And that's why I was able to start scouting people. And because I already knew what type of traits I wanted, which is what I already explained here, and I had somebody in mind, I look out and I said, hey, this is someone that might be a good fit, right? And then I let HR do their job. They started the whole process and they found that. But to me, I think that's been the case. And if you ask me right now, would you move somewhere else? I think right now, no. I think I'm pretty good. I want to keep growing into this path, but you never know. Later on, maybe as I think twice. I say, you know what, I'm going to apply to law school, and if I get in, let's see what other things are there. But if not, why not keep growing in this path? But it's always about growing and doing what you love. That's how my life has happened so far. And you're right. I think that I'm one of those that it's never happy with just doing the same over and over every day. Yeah, just me. Mhm.
Sounds like it stems more from intellectual curiosity.
Yeah. When did you put together your LinkedIn? Did you put it together after you were in university, or did you do it in like, I don't know, I know people that do it in like high school or?
It's so interesting. I put it together when I was an exchange student at UCSD back in 2008. And somebody came in to talk about social media in 2008, right? What was there, like MySpace or something like that? I can't recall. And I remember that they talk about LinkedIn and being professional. And I opened it without knowing what it was, honestly. And then little by little, when I was at KTI, they started telling us, you have to clean this up, because this is how people are going to start reaching out to you. And you don't have to put tons of things and fluff because people will know, right? You just have to be very specific. This is where I've been, this is what I've done. If it's more than 6 months, I think it's worth to put in this thing. If you have done little things here and there, and just staying 1 month and 1 month and 1 month, it doesn't look really good because people pinpoint that out and they're like, oh, they haven't had any tenure. So it's like, okay. But I think it's just maturing it based on the guidance that you have and what you have done. And that's how I have been building my LinkedIn, because I used to have tons of things. And now I am slowly taking off things because of, I've noticed that I've grown, but it's more like, okay, I'm going to take off things that don't really matter anymore, So, yeah. Any other questions? Amy, Abdul, Beatriz, Lily, Kusha, Sorina.
I have a question, Paula. I don't know if this is like a bad question or not, but I was wondering if you can please share any typical entry-level job titles or starter keywords to look for in an internship and work, especially if we're new to business, no experience, and not quite sure what to look for?
Yeah. So I think that usually you can look for associate level positions. You can look for specialist sort of positions. Usually those are entry level. You can look for rotational programs. That's how companies usually advertise them, like rotational program in XYZ, right? You can just look. Sometimes there are websites that have a division between their careers. Like, here in Loxo, they have careers and like science careers, right? But I remember that in Regeneron, it was like internships, and they had a whole university relations team, managing that pipeline. So I think it depends from company to company. What I would do, and this is something that I have done myself, I like to be very methodic because I hate to send duplicate emails or like send, review something and they miss, information. Just start having a literally Excel spreadsheet and start putting, the company, the link, the positions that you're interested in, and then keep an eye on those, because it might be that somebody will open up something a little bit more junior, depending on what the needs of the company are. But usually I would just say that look for associate, look for a specialist, look for a coordinator, look for rotational programs, and look for internships like that, just internships. And sometimes even Google the company they're interested in and some keywords like those that I just shared with you, and let's see what pops up, because you never imagine what the browser will bring back to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, how would you advise approaching a company or you're interested in their work? No, what I would say is that if it's a CEO of a company, most likely they won't even be on LinkedIn. And if they are, it's one of those LinkedIn kind of like celebrity type of LinkedIn, to be honest with you, because it's not them posting, it's their corporate communications team posting on behalf of them. Most likely that's what's happening. So I would just say read about that, and maybe rather than going straight to the CEO, perhaps look for people that, when you search on LinkedIn and it's like, let's say Lux Oncology and Lilly, and you put that name, it sometimes pops up, second degree connections, or third degree connections of people that might be working there. So I would start there, right? If you have someone that already knows someone in that company that works there, it might be easier to go through that path rather than going straight to the top and trying to have an answer, because most likely that's not going to happen. The other way would be more than approaching a CEO on LinkedIn, which is very impersonal. I mean, if in case that you come to KGI, right, see who might know someone, again, that can connect you to someone working on that company and start working out that relationship that way. I know that KGI has a really good, robust career advisory type of department. I think it's Angela and her teammates. I don't know if Angela's still around. It's been some time, right? But if there's somebody in career services, they also have information who might be there or who might be able to start having a communication. Because as I said, if you're just reaching out directly to the CEO on LinkedIn without any, like out of the blue, I don't think you're going to be getting an answer. Yeah. I think Amy has a question.
Yeah, I had a quick question about like interviews. How do you approach interview, and like how do you basically show what you can provide for the company, and like maybe connect with people there or the recruiters? How do you go about that? You can talk a little bit about it.
So I think for interviews, I mean, I know sounds terrible because it's like always like try to get someone that knows someone that works in there, right? And it's not easy. I've been in that situation that I don't know anyone that works there, and I don't know anyone that could connect me, right? But again, going back into having communications with people that you may trust, you never know if there might be someone in your network that can help you out reaching out, right? So for interviews, I mean, sometimes it's better just to apply on their website on the position they're interested in, and then you know that sometimes they have in their application system to write a small paragraph for like a statement, and people just literally copy paste sometimes statements of things that they have been using in the past. I've caught situations where they're applying to a role in a company that I'm not even, it's like, what are you writing this to me? It's for someone else, right? But take that space maybe to write a note and just say, hey, you know, to whom it you know, correspond, or to whom it may concern. I'm really interested in this position. I have a background in XYZ and I've been doing blah, blah, blah. I would be, you know, it would be great if we could have an opportunity to at least talk for an informational session with your HR team right then, you know, because what happens is that there's another platform in the backend, right? That when your profile drops, that note gets there somehow, and people read that. I read that. And if there's like at least have an informational session, I could see what their request is. You know, you're not pushing to get the job, which is ultimately what you want, but you're maybe asking for an opportunity to have some informational session with their HR team, right? Me as a manager, if I would say something like this, I will ask, you know, my colleagues in HR, hey, can you please just chat, you know, with this candidate? Perhaps it's not qualified at this time, but, you know, just screen them and see what you can learn from them, you know. And depending on what consent you provide, because now it's all about privacy and informed consent and blah, 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 right? So if you consent to be contacted in the future, your personal information, which is your name and your email, will stay in the system for a specific period of time, right? If you do not consent, that will be deleted right away. That's it. But I think that these are things that you need to know to approach things. And then when you're in an interview setting, you know, always be ready with questions as well, because when you're learning about a job, it's not only them learning about you or what you can provide, but I think it's our responsibility to ask questions to really understand if we want that, right? Because sometimes it's like if you think it's a good fit, but after talking to the person, you realize that's not. I don't think it's fair to you because it's your life plan. I would not want to spend time with a company that I thought it was fantastic, and then all of a sudden I realize it's a mess, right? Or that they really don't want me there. Or like at some point, even like, again, going back into reading the news, you might think, oh my God, this is fantastic. But then you go to stat and then you go to Genome Web and then you go to the news and realize they're having, you know, they're being called in by the US government of blah, 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 like, you know, an agency. And you're like, what? Pay attention to this, you know? So I think that when you go into an interview or ask for an interview, before that, if you're not so sure, ask for an informational session. That's it. And that will help you to start, you know, triggering the communication. And don't ask for an hour. Usually people, what they ask is for 15 minutes, no more than that. Don't set up a meeting for an hour and a half, because to be honest, no, that's not gonna happen. Somebody's behind me. No, I thought it was, no, sorry. I saw Beatrice, I saw your background and I thought there was someone walking behind me because I'm so focused. I'm so sorry.
No, sorry, it's my kids.
It's okay. Yeah. But yeah, that's my answer. I mean, I hope I answered your question, Eva, and it was helpful.
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
I have another question. I guess like how do you find those mentor or like mentee relationships? How do you establish them, and do you currently have a mentor?
Yeah. Oh, so I do. I actually have a mentor. My former manager of Regeneron, I think she's now one of my biggest champions, mentors, and friends, because we developed that relationship, right? Before that, I would say at school, I can even say that at KGI, my mentor is still Sofia Toro, the admissions thing, because she's so approachable and she's been part of my journey before I even reached, KGI. I remember I applied in 2009. I started reaching out for informational sessions because I was not ready. And then I enrolled in the following year, which was 2010. So I think that's another piece, right? Who else could be my mentor at this time? A lawyer. I think that one of the lawyers from my former job too, because she was so strict. This is the odd thing too. The people that you think are the strict, strict is like so difficult, like so challenging sometimes to work with. Once you kind of cross that barrier with them, oh my God, you have connections and friends forever. And I think I remember crying after some of those meetings with her because she was so harsh, but I learned so much. And up to this day, she'll be the one pointing me out, like, you can do this, that, and like, this practice is that, and like, don't miss this. And I just like to have those, those type of people in my life too. I just don't like the fluffy, nice touch. I also like people who are, direct and hard sometimes for me to wake up. I think that those are also really appreciated. And then for other, I'm just calling out people now by name, right? I shouldn't be doing that. But I think we're keeping relationships and mentors is about having sometimes the opportunity to have some chat with some coffee. I have also good mentors in the other side of the world. And right now, for instance, in the China, right, there was a lockdown for more than 50 days in China. And one of the people that I work with right now, she couldn't leave her house. And these are people that are there, they're real, right? And then you keep sending emails without really thinking through it. And she's really good. She's a really good colleague. And she's also been kind of mentoring me in other aspects. And I reached out and I said, hey, do you have time for tea? Because I know your time zone is the opposite to mine. So your 10 p.m. is my 9 a.m., 8:30 a.m. Do you have time for some tea? And she was delighted, right? So I think that keeping those connections alive without just talking about work or like career or like school, having the opportunity to connect as humans is also very important, Beatriz. And I think that for me, it's always like, regardless if we're remote, having that extra time to open your Zoom, have a drink, have some coffee, have some tea, depending on have a beer, why not? If you're like over 21, right? Otherwise, no. But just really having a chat and see how you are. And I think that's how you develop these relationships. It can be awkward at the beginning because there has to be some opportunity for them to also be able to open up. But I think that if you're genuine, people sense that and they open up to you too. Yeah.
Great.
Anyone else have any questions? I know we have about 7 more minutes here with Paola.
Paula, I have a question. I've gotten this interview question asking how do you handle time management and multiple tasks with competing deadlines? I've answered in an interview that I would prioritize whichever deadline comes first, but I felt that wasn't a strong or good enough answer. And I'm not sure if this question is poking on maybe work culture, if like they expect me to do overtime, or if they expect me to like, I guess, not do overtime and kind of like ask help from teammates. So yeah.
I'm going to tell you 2 of my potential answers to that. We're going to cheat here right now, and I'm on video. This is terrible. So I think my first answer would be align to the company strategy. So if they have a division of programs, projects, there's something always in their pipeline that has to go out first, because if that goes out first, most likely somebody's going to take the ball and keep running with it until there's the output of or the result is achieved, right? So I think that for you, I would say like, yeah, it's about prioritizing based on internal strategy or, ultimately corporate goals, because that will pull you out on saying like, I know everything is important and that's my life right now. Everything is important. Everything has to be done by yesterday. I know, but I can only have 5 days a week, 8 hours. Of course, sometimes I spend more because that's what I need. And I like to work at night, by the way. Sometimes I take time off on the night, and then maybe in the morning, I don't log in at 9 a.m. I log in at 9:30, I don't know. But I spend the other extra time making sure that I'm understanding what needs to get done, right? So I think that making sure that you're aligned with corporate goals and you are able to understand what needs to get done that in a short period of time, like just this week, right? And then on that timeline, it's not only about time and strategy, but also about questions that need to still be answered, right? So you might have all these different things happening at the same time, but in those instances, you might need to have additional information to basically perform the job, right? And that also comes back into how do you manage understanding what questions need to be asked and what information you need to collect in order to have a well-rounded case for you to execute and move on. So if you see that one of these things is almost complete, it's aligning to corporate, goals, and has to be done in a specific, weekday, or like a week, a week, for instance, 5 days a week, I would think that will go out first, right? if you have additional questions, if you just to make sure that you're validating for that, I think it's, as you said, working with teammates, but also learning how to escalate to the right people. Because you might think that your teammate on your right will have the answer, but most likely no. Or you might think that the boss will have your answer, but that's more likely no. Maybe an external stakeholder. So learning how to understand who's the right person to escalate that information for decision making will help you also understand what needs to be going out first in case you need validation. Yeah.
How would we go about figuring out what the corporate goals are?
Go to their website. Most likely everyone has a pipeline, and you will see there, depending where you are. If you're on the more development side, you can see that on the pipeline. If you're on the discovery side, like I am, talk to your boss and see, because most likely people that are in leadership positions know, right, what are the conversations about what needs to go out first. So if you need to just chat with them on a one-on-one and bring that in so you understand what needs to go out, that's all you need to do. Use your resources, basically. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Paula. Can I ask another question?
Mm-hmm.
What is a better way to ask, I guess, like HR and the interviewer, maybe interviewer application feedback? Because I've gotten some rejections, so I was wondering, like, is there a better strategy or approach besides sending an email to ask if they have any feedback of how I can grow more or learn or anything?
But rather than having that, because they don't know you as a person, perhaps just again ask HR to have a brief call with you to debrief on the output of the conversations that happen in case you didn't move forward in their pipeline. So because you just want to understand better, right? Don't put it on them to let you know what mistakes you did, because sometimes it's not about that. You don't know what happened on the other end. Maybe that position closed. Maybe you have a good profile, but you're not the right fit. If you advance in some, I don't know, interview process with several stakeholders, it might be that, multiple of them have the same concern, and that's the reason why you didn't move forward. If you didn't even reach to the manager stage, perhaps it would be best just to connect with HR and say, hey, I just want to understand, if you have any feedback with respect to your process, and would you have 15 minutes to chat? So talk about their process and understand what's their take rather than talking about you, because they don't know you. So yeah, that would be the approach to have with these particular instances.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Paola, for your time and for meeting with these students. I'll hand it off to Paola if she has anything last minute to say.
No, thank you everyone for joining today. I know I like to have these more like small group settings so we can really chat. As you just saw, I just gave you a quick snapshot, but in reality, it's more about you learning what opportunities you have when, again, invest in your education. Not to give a promotional thing here, but again, I think that I'm really thankful and grateful for the education I received from KGI. And I can see now the fruits of, taking those paths, going through the process. And yeah, I apply what I learned. And most importantly, I'm staying connecting with the institution by chatting with all of you. So hopefully you will make your decision, and later on we'll be all of us alumni. So thank you.
Thank you, Paola. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.